Okay, so I'm very thankful for the previous speaker for having a toxicologist speaking before me, because for the first time in my life talking about regulatory issues on nanomedicine, I can be the nice guy. So thank you very much, Dominic. It's a difficult presentation because I will try to relate to some of the things you heard already today. And I just remember you about some of the issues that were addressed by Mike Eaton this morning, and also referring to some of the highlights from Philippe Martin during this afternoon and for the two previous speakers. I think that I will try to integrate more of that. Just for disclosure, and you'll have that on the slides, my current affiliations, and of course, what I'm saying here, just it's my own opinion and doesn't engage anyone I'm working with at the current moment. So the first thing to be aware, and I think this is very important and we have to go fast on saving time, is that when we are talking about nanotechnology, and this is published data on Nature Nanotechnology, about networking research on several of the areas, you see immediately that we have the material sector and you have the biomedical sector, and on the biomedical sector you have a number of clinical issues very visible. So it's a very good way to look at how to map, and all those nuts are hundreds of publications across the different groups. So this is a very good manner to identify immediately what we are talking about when we relate to nanotechnology and health. The second one, and going to the historical perspective and the systems perspective, is looking at size, but also at different technologies. And just to remember that we are not talking about only breakthrough technology, we are talking about a number of technologies that are with us for 60 years now. If we relate to Alec Bangham and the liposome technology, we go back to 1950. If we go back to Helmut Ringsdorf and the polymer therapeutics, we go back to 1975. And if you go back to ETH in Zurich, to Peter Speiser and the first polymeric nanoparticles for therapeutic use or intended therapeutic use, we are talking about 73, 74. So we have an extensive amount of platforms and knowledge coming from research, and I would say a number of clinical products, clinically relevant products that are over there. I was discussing with one of the participants during the coffee break, and one of the things we are discussing always in terms of innovation, and we forget to tell people, is that we are already saving people every day. The first nanopharmaceutical as conceivable, the amphotericin B liposomes, were first administered to humans 30 years ago at the MD Anderson for cancer patients with neutropenia and a systemic fungal infection. And that product is approved on the market in Europe for 20 years through a national procedure, in fact. Those products save people every day. Cancer patients that otherwise will be dead because the dose of amphotericin B from the previous formulation had to be much lower due to renal toxicity. So we have to keep in mind and in context what we are talking about and the breakthrough events and the fancy science and the fancy technology, but also the innovation translated into clinical terms. And again, this is a mapping of some of those technologies in a more chronographic manner, so you can see some of the products here on the borderline that we are currently discussing, like the carbon nanotubes and the quantum dots and others, that I will, well, provocatively say that I think it's unethical to conceive today to have them administered in humans, and eventually even unethical to consider the administration in animals for some of the experiments. We have products on the market for different applications. First, for contrast agents, the MRI agents, and we have a spread of products over there. And those products are highlighted here in terms of the marketed products, and some of those products still on late clinical development. The same for the nanocrystal technology, and the nanocrystal technology has been very important because it has moved from a conceivable paradigm of using nanotechnology only for the parenteral administration, and it moved it to the oral delivery, and in fact just changing the surface area of the particles increased the bioavailability in a manner that made these products very important ones. And as you know, the first ones are life-saving products in immunosuppressant therapy and looking at people that went through transplantation, for example. The second batch, and this is the historical batch coming from 1988-89, the first approval in Europe, Ambisome. It's the liposomes, or I would say the lipidic systems, because some of those products are not really liposomes, like Abelset. It's really a lipidic structure, what we call not a micellar, not a lamellar phase, but an hexagonal two inverted lipidic phase. But it's really important products that are saving people in several, you can see a majority of those are in cancer. Even the fungal infection ones are mostly used today in cancer. And these are products that already mobilize a number of very important companies. And you don't see it here really because we say here Schering-Plough now, as you know, it's Merck in Europe for Calyx, but Doxil in US is Johnson & Johnson. So, and Novartis and Takeda and Gilead and Astellas, you have major players there with some of those products. The polymeric nanoparticles started, as I said, with Peter Speiser, Patrick Couvreur, and Jörg Kreuter in the 70s, and developed through a concept of, I would say, non-biodegradable particles at the first, then bioerodible particles, and finally with the polylactides and other polymers for the biodegradable polymers. And we have extensive, you can see here one of the first publications in 1977. There are some in 1973, 74 with non-biodegradable polymers. So we have extensive data since that with hundreds of publications. And I would like to highlight this is a very interesting story because we have the first clinical trial with these cyanoacrylate nanoparticles published in 1992. In fact, it was performed in 1989, 1990. And we still don't have a product there because if we go to the historical development of this product, it was the victim of mergers between companies, it was the victim of wrongly designed trials, and it's currently going through a late-stage clinical development for one of the applications I would say it should have been developed at start, which is hepatocarcinoma. So it's also a very good story about how you do translation, how you make some mistakes, and how we all as a community learn from those mistakes in order to improve the translation of our products. Abraxane was referred already here. One of the things that Neil Desai didn't mention is really here on the corner, the right corner of the slide, is the easier way of administration of paclitaxel when it is formulated with Abraxane. And in my view, my personal view, I don't know if Neil is still in the room, in my personal view, this is why major breakthrough of Abraxane was made on the clinic, and Abraxane is a market success story even against generic paclitaxel, in my view, mostly because of the better medical use that can be done with this formulation compared with the competitors. And a pipeline of products, and I've purposely put here nanoparticles into brackets because this is the kind of problems we have from publications, even from very relevant journals. This is a non-exhaustive list of products being developed, but you have in the middle things like dendrimers, and dendrimers are not nanoparticles. They're really polymer therapeutics. They don't have really a 3D structure as a particle. But the problems of classification and terminology are very, very important in the way we are referring to these systems. And again, the family of polymer therapeutics, looking mostly of cancer applications, the current stage, and I would refer, because there's an important product that is not on this table, it's Cimzia, which is used currently approved for rheumatoid arthritis, but also under development for psoriasis and Crohn's disease. And we have the problem of the evolution of the sector, and the major problem that I see in terms of the regulation for the coming period is the integration between diagnostics and therapeutics. We'll be seeing more and more trends on that way because the nanotechnology, in terms of the materials that we are using in the new systems, and also the nanofluidics that we are gaining from some of the engineering breakthroughs, are now going through development phase in terms of the medical devices. And they are very useful tools in terms not only identifying biomarkers, but also in terms of the clinical management of diseases, looking at systems biology really at the bed of the patient and looking to the integrative, kinetic approach of assessing those clinically relevant biomarkers, both for efficacy and for safety.